before Rome, before Greece, before the Maya carved their cities into the jungle. There was a kingdom born from a river, a civilization that worshipped the sun, that built monuments so massive we still cannot fully explain them, that turned death into eternity. Pharaohs ruled like gods, pyramids touched the sky, bodies were preserved for the afterlife, and at the very end, a queen named Cleopatra would face Rome itself. This is the story of ancient Egypt, rebuilt, brick by brick. Chapter 1. The rise of the Nile Kingdom before Rome built its legions, before Greece shaped philosophy, before empires clashed across continents. A river in the middle of the desert gave birth to eternity. The Nile, a ribbon of life cutting through endless sand. Each year, like clockwork, the river flooded its banks. The waters spread across the land, leaving behind rich black soil. When the waters receded, crops flourished. Wheat, barley, flax. Life thrived in a place where life should not have existed. Without the Nile, there would be no Egypt. And from this river, one of the most powerful civilizations in human history was born. Around 3100 BC, scattered farming communities along the Nile began uniting. Trade increased, settlements expanded, leadership emerged, and then came a ruler known as Narmer, sometimes identified as Menes, who achieved something extraordinary. He unified Upper and Lower Egypt. For the first time, the two lands became one kingdom under a single crown. This unification marked the beginning of dynastic Egypt and the rise of the pharaohs. But the pharaoh was not merely a king, he was a god. The Egyptians believed their ruler was the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon god of the sky. When a pharaoh died, he became Osiris, ruler of the afterlife. The next pharaoh became Horus again. It was a divine cycle. Power was not political, it was cosmic. The pharaoh's role was to maintain Ma'at, the sacred balance of order, truth, and harmony. If Ma'at failed, chaos would consume the world, floods would stop, crops would fail, the sun itself might not rise. Everything depended on the pharaoh. Under his rule, Egypt became highly organized. Society followed a strict hierarchy. At the top stood the royal family. Beneath them were high priests and nobles who managed temples and estates. Scribes recorded laws and harvests in hieroglyphic script. Soldiers protected borders. Artisans crafted jewelry and statues. Farmers sustained the population. The Nile shaped daily life. Its flooding cycle dictated planting seasons. Irrigation systems were engineered to control water flow. Early Egyptians mastered agricultural planning with remarkable precision, but it was not only survival that drove them. It was immortality. The Egyptians believed life on earth was temporary, a preparation for eternity. Death was not an end, but a passage. The soul consisted of multiple elements: the Ka, the life force, the Ba, the personality, and the Ak, the transformed spirit. For the soul to survive, the body had to remain intact. And so began one of the most extraordinary rituals in human history: mummification. At first, bodies were buried in shallow desert graves. The dry sand naturally preserved them. But as tombs grew more elaborate, artificial preservation became necessary. Embalmers developed a meticulous process. The brain was removed through the nose using specialized hooks. Internal organs were extracted and placed into canopic jars, each protected by a specific deity. The body cavity was cleansed with palm wine and packed with natron salts to dry it completely. For 40 days, the body rested in salt. Then it was washed, wrapped in layers of linen, and placed inside elaborately decorated coffins. This was not just preservation. It was preparation for eternity. The deceased would face judgment in the Hall of Ma'at. The heart would be weighed against a feather, symbol of truth. If the heart was heavier, burdened by sin, it would be devoured by Ammit, the soul-eating monster. If balanced, the soul would enter the field of reeds, a paradise mirroring life along the Nile. Religion permeated every aspect of Egyptian life. Temples rose across the land, dedicated to gods like Ra, the sun god who sailed across the sky each day. Isis, goddess of magic and motherhood. Anubis, guardian of mummification. And Osiris, lord of the underworld. Priests performed daily rituals to ensure divine favor. And then came architecture. During the Third Dynasty, Pharaoh Djoser commissioned something unprecedented. His architect, Imhotep, a genius centuries ahead of his time, designed the step pyramid at Saqqara. It was the first monumental stone structure in history. Layer upon layer of stone rose toward the heavens. It was not merely a tomb. It was a staircase to the sky. This marked the beginning of the Old Kingdom, the Age of Pyramids. As pharaohs sought greater immortality, pyramids grew larger and more ambitious. Techniques evolved. Workforce organization improved. Massive quarrying operations transported limestone blocks across the Nile. Contrary to myth, these monuments were not built by slaves. Archaeological discoveries reveal organized labor forces, skilled workers housed in planned communities, fed and medically treated. Teams were named with pride: Friends of Khufu, Drunkards of Menkaure. Building a pyramid was a national project, a symbol of divine authority. And then, around 2600 BC, Egypt achieved something astonishing. Pharaoh Khufu ordered the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza, over 2 million limestone blocks, each weighing several tons, aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. For nearly 4,000 years, it remained the tallest man-made structure on Earth. Even today, engineers debate how such precision was achieved without modern tools. The pyramid was more than stone. It was theology carved into architecture. Its shape mirrored the rays of the sun. It symbolized the pharaoh's ascension to join Ra in the heavens. Beside Khufu's pyramid rose those of Khafre and Menkaure. Guarding them stood the great Sphinx, part lion, part human, staring eternally across the desert. Egypt seemed eternal, stable, unshakable. The Nile continued its cycles. Pyramids pierced the sky. Pharaohs ruled with divine authority. But no civilization, no matter how powerful, escapes change. As centuries passed, internal struggles emerged. Central authority weakened. Regional governors gained influence. The Old Kingdom eventually fractured into a period historians call the First Intermediate Period. For the first time, Egypt's unity faltered. But Egypt would rise again, because this was only the beginning. The river still flowed, the gods were still worshipped, and new pharaohs would emerge, stronger, more ambitious, more determined to leave their mark on eternity. The age of pyramids had begun, but the greatest pharaohs were yet to come. Egypt had already built monuments that defied imagination. The pyramids stood like mountains of stone. The Nile continued its eternal rhythm, but the civilization was about to enter its most powerful and dramatic era, the New Kingdom. This would become the age of warrior pharaohs, colossal temples, divine kings, and legendary rulers whose names still echo through history. After periods of instability, Egypt was reunified around 1550 BC under Ahmose II, who expelled foreign rulers known as the Hyksos. Their invasion had shaken Egypt, introducing new weapons like horse-drawn chariots. But instead of weakening Egypt permanently, the crisis transformed it. Egypt adapted. It militarized. It expanded. The New Kingdom was born. Unlike earlier pharaohs who focused primarily on monumental tombs, these rulers projected power outward. Egypt became an empire stretching deep into Nubia in the south and into the Levant in the north. Among the early powerful rulers stood Hatshepsut, one of the most remarkable figures in ancient history. A woman who declared herself pharaoh, she did not merely act as regent. She adopted full royal regalia, including the ceremonial false beard worn by male kings. Her reign was marked not by constant war, but by prosperity and trade. She launched expeditions to the mysterious land of Punt, bringing back incense, gold, exotic animals, and wealth. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari remains one of the most elegant architectural achievements of ancient Egypt. But the empire also required military strength. Thutmose III, often called the Napoleon of Egypt, led numerous successful campaigns into Syria and Canaan. His military genius expanded Egypt's borders further than ever before. Tribute flowed into Thebes, gold, livestock, captives, and resources that enriched temples and palaces. Religion during this era reached extraordinary complexity. The god Amun rose to supreme prominence, merging with Ra to become Amun-Ra, king of the gods. The priesthood of Amun accumulated enormous wealth and influence. Then came a ruler who dared to challenge the religious order, Akhenaten. He attempted something radical, the elevation of Aten, the sun disk, as the supreme and perhaps sole deity. He moved the capital to a newly built city, Akhenaten, and altered artistic styles dramatically. Figures became elongated, naturalistic, almost surreal. But after his death, traditional religion returned swiftly, and from this restoration emerged one of the most famous names in all of history, Tutankhamun, the boy king. Ascending the throne around age 9, Tutankhamun ruled only briefly. His political impact was limited, but his burial would become legendary. In 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter uncovered his nearly intact tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Inside were over 5,000 artifacts, golden chariots, jewelry, weapons, thrones, and the now iconic golden funerary mask. The world was captivated. The myth of the curse of the mummy spread after several individuals connected to the tomb's discovery died unexpectedly. Newspapers sensationalized the story. But the real power of the discovery lay in what it revealed: the staggering craftsmanship, wealth, and devotion invested in preparing a pharaoh for the afterlife. By this time, pyramid construction had largely ceased. Pharaohs of the New Kingdom were buried in hidden tombs carved into cliffs in the Valley of the Kings to prevent looting. Yet even hidden tombs were not always safe. Mummies of great rulers were later relocated secretly by priests attempting to protect them from grave robbers. Today, we can look into the preserved faces of rulers who lived over 3,000 years ago. And then came Ramses II, Ramses the Great. He ruled for over 60 years, an almost unimaginable span of time in the ancient world. He built monuments on a scale rivaling the pyramid builders. His temple at Abu Simbel was carved directly into solid rock, featuring colossal statues of himself seated like a god overlooking the Nile. Ramses fought the Hittites in the Battle of Kadesh, one of the largest chariot battles in history. Though the outcome was strategically indecisive, Ramses declared victory and immortalized himself in inscriptions across Egypt. He understood something critical: history is shaped by narrative. He built statues of himself across the empire. His image was everywhere, his name carved deep into stone. Under his rule, Egypt reached a zenith of power and visibility. Yet beneath the golden splendor, cracks were forming. The immense building projects strained resources. Maintaining distant territories required constant military presence. The priesthood of Amun grew increasingly powerful, sometimes rivaling royal authority. The Sea Peoples, mysterious raiders from the Mediterranean, attacked Egypt's borders in the late New Kingdom. Though repelled temporarily, the attacks signaled instability in the wider region. As Ramses II aged and died, the system that had sustained Egypt for centuries began to weaken. Succession disputes arose. Economic pressures increased. Climate changes may have affected agricultural yields. The pharaoh remained divine in theory, but human in vulnerability. The Golden Age was fading. Egypt had built monuments that touched the sky. It had mastered mummification, architecture, religion, and imperial expansion. Its pharaohs ruled as gods. But no empire remains untouched by time, and soon foreign powers would look upon Egypt not as a superpower, but as a prize. In the next chapter, Egypt will face invasion, transformation, and one final legendary ruler whose name would forever link Egypt with Rome: Cleopatra, the last queen of the Nile. Chapter 3: Cleopatra and the Fall of a Goddess Empire. For thousands of years, Egypt had stood as a pillar of civilization. Its pyramids pierced the sky. Its pharaohs ruled as gods. Its mummies were prepared for eternity. But even the most divine kingdoms are not immune to time. After the death of Ramses II, Egypt began to weaken. The long reign that had symbolized stability now gave way to shorter, less decisive rulers. The massive building projects of previous generations had drained resources. Maintaining distant territories became increasingly difficult. Trade routes were disrupted. Agricultural production faced fluctuations that may have been influenced by environmental shifts. The once unshakable structure of divine kingship began to fracture. By the end of the New Kingdom, around 1070 BC, central authority collapsed. Egypt entered another period of fragmentation known as the Third Intermediate Period. Regional leaders gained power. High priests of Amun in Thebes wielded influence rivaling the pharaoh himself. Egypt was still culturally powerful, but politically unstable, and instability invites conquest. In the 7th century BC, the Assyrians invaded. Their armies swept through Egypt, defeating local rulers. Though the Assyrian control was relatively brief, it signaled a new reality. Egypt was no longer untouchable. Soon after, the Persians conquered the land, incorporating Egypt into the vast Achaemenid Empire. For centuries, Egypt would shift between periods of independence and foreign rule. But then came a figure whose arrival would reshape the entire ancient world. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great marched into Egypt. Unlike previous conquerors, he was welcomed as a liberator. The Persians had grown unpopular, and Alexander presented himself not as a destroyer, but as a divine successor. He traveled to the Oracle of Amun at Siwa Oasis, where he was declared the son of the god. In Egypt, divinity mattered. Alexander founded a new city on the Mediterranean coast, Alexandria. It would become one of the greatest centers of knowledge in history. The Library of Alexandria would house hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Scholars from across the known world would gather there. Mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, knowledge flourished. When Alexander died in 323 BC, his empire fractured. One of his generals, Ptolemy, seized control of Egypt. Thus began the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line of Greek rulers who adopted Egyptian customs while maintaining Hellenistic culture. For nearly 3 centuries, the Ptolemies ruled Egypt. They preserved temples. They respected traditional religious structures. They portrayed themselves as pharaohs in Egyptian art, even though they spoke Greek and governed as Macedonian monarchs. And then, in 69 BC, a girl was born who would become the most famous Egyptian ruler of all, Cleopatra VII. Unlike many of her predecessors, Cleopatra embraced both worlds. She spoke multiple languages, including Egyptian, a rarity among the Ptolemies. She understood politics deeply. She inherited a kingdom weakened by internal conflict and external pressure, and looming in the distance was Rome. Rome was rising as the dominant Mediterranean power. Its legions expanded relentlessly. Its generals carved out influence across continents. Cleopatra knew Egypt could not face Rome alone. She made an alliance with Julius Caesar. Their relationship was both political and personal. Caesar supported her claim to the throne in a civil war against her brother. In return, Cleopatra secured Egypt's temporary stability. She bore him a son, Caesarion. But Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC. Rome descended into chaos. Cleopatra then aligned herself with Mark Antony, one of Rome's most powerful generals. Together, they sought to counterbalance the growing influence of Octavian, the future Augustus. Their partnership was strategic and passionate. But Rome's political climate was ruthless. Octavian launched a propaganda campaign, portraying Cleopatra as a dangerous foreign seductress manipulating Antony. Roman public opinion turned. In 31 BC, their forces met Octavian's fleet at the Battle of Actium. It was decisive. Antony and Cleopatra were defeated. They retreated to Egypt. With Roman forces advancing and defeat inevitable, Antony took his own life. Cleopatra followed soon after. According to legend, she allowed herself to be bitten by an asp, a sacred Egyptian symbol. With her death in 30 BC, Egypt became a Roman province. The age of pharaohs had ended. For over 3,000 years, Egypt had existed as an independent civilization shaped by the Nile, guided by gods, ruled by divine kings. Now it belonged to Rome. But something remarkable happened. Egypt did not disappear. Its temples continued to stand. Its priests still conducted rituals for centuries. Its language gradually faded, but its symbols endured, and its monuments remained. The pyramids still dominate the desert horizon. The Sphinx still watches silently over Giza. Mummies preserved thousands of years ago still lie in carefully sealed chambers. In 1799, a French soldier discovered the Rosetta Stone, a slab inscribed with the same text in Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphs. In 1822, Jean-François Champollion deciphered hieroglyphics. The silent voices of ancient Egypt began to speak again. Through archaeology, we have uncovered tombs, cities, temples buried beneath sand. We have CT-scanned mummies. We have reconstructed faces. We have read royal decrees carved in stone. Ancient Egypt transformed death into immortality. And in a way, it succeeded. Because thousands of years later, we still speak the names of its pharaohs: Khufu, Ramses, Tutankhamun, Cleopatra. We still marvel at pyramids whose construction defies easy explanation. We still study their mathematics, their astronomy, their engineering. Egypt rose from a river. It mastered eternity. It survived invasion, conquest, transformation. Empires fall, kingdoms fade, but some civilizations carve their legacy so deeply into history that they never truly vanish. Ancient Egypt was not just a kingdom. It was a symbol of permanence in a world of change, built from sand and river, crowned in gold, preserved in stone, and remembered forever.